This is INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesianicristo.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome to INC Radio Florida. I'm one of your hosts this morning, Brother Robert Topalis, coming to you here from Tampa. Been on a plane for the last 3 days, so I'm not exactly sure where I've been. So today I'm actually coming to you from Tampa. It's, of course, Saturday, the 5th of July here on the East Coast of the United States. It's already about 9:31 in the morning here. So that means it's already 9:30 in the evening there in the Philippines. So, of course, we want to greet everyone and thank you all for staying up late to watch us. But for those international greetings, I'm going to go ahead and toss this back over to Sister Joy, who happens to be there in Orlando, in the center of our state, also known as AKA the happiest place in Florida. Sister Joy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Brother Robert. And indeed, it is a joyful place to be here in the central part of the District of Florida. We are indeed happy to have all of you with us today. So good morning, buenos dias, guten morgen. Maganda. It's not umaga there in the Philippines, right?
No, it's not.
Right? It's nighttime. So thank you, especially to those who are tuning in on the other side of the globe, the Philippines. Thank you again, because we know it is late, because while it's morning here, it is evening time over there. So wherever you are on the globe, we're always delighted to hear from where you're tuning in from. So be sure to tune in and let us know where you are listening or watching from on our YouTube chat, because we want to know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we also want to give, even though I know she's having some technical difficulties right now, we want to welcome Sister Audrey, who's also joining us from Tampa, Florida. Good morning, Sister Audrey. I think you can hear us.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday, or, well, yeah, either Saturday morning or Saturday evening.
Depending on where you are, right? What side of the globe and time zone you happen to be. Well, if you're joining us today, we're excited and anxious, I want to say, about our topic today, because we're going to be talking about a topic that's probably very polarizing. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see the topic description. We're going to be talking about screen time and the proliferation of screen time. And Sister Joy, just as I forewarned before the start of our show, you may have to referee between Sister Audrey and I, because two different generations, two different approaches, two different interpretations. But
what's interesting? I do happen to be in the middle of these generations. I've been sandwiched in between. So
That is true,
right? Isn't it? So I've seen both ends. I'm in the middle of both ends. So I'm.
Oh, but are you in the middle of both opinions, though?
Oh, okay.
That's a card Sister Joy hasn't revealed yet.
Yeah, Sister Joy, you're gonna have to play an unbiased and very objective role here between Sister Audrey and myself, and of course the dynamic here, for those of you that are joining, if you're new to the show, the dynamic here is a little interesting, because as many of you know, Sister Audrey is my daughter-in-law, and we have a grandson through my son and her that my wife and I, of course, get to see very often. So screen time becomes very touchy, very sort of, as I use the word, polarizing subject amongst discussions. And of course, today on INC Radio Florida, we're here to give you facts, and then we'll interject our opinions.
Yeah, and we all have opinions. We definitely.
But we're going to give you facts first, then, right? So let's go ahead and jump. Let's just jump right in. I mean, as they always say, if you're scared of getting in the pool, you might as well just jump in the water. So
absolutely, that's how I learned how to swim.
Exactly, you get thrown into the deep end. So, Kuya, if you could please put us in grid mode here, put us in thumbnail mode, so this way we can actually see our facial expressions as we get shocked by these statistics that we're about to talk about here. So as you take a look here on the screen, you can see our topic, of course, is a screen time showdown. I feel like this is, one of those competitions that we have kind of worry about, like, bring it on, right?
I know.
So, but when
Put
we're
on like a
talking about,
cowboy hat. All
yeah,
right.
exactly. And it's funny, and this is a very quick aside. We just got back from traveling to our friends up north in Calgary, Canada. I get to spend 4 beautiful days up in Calgary, Canada, and a shout out to all of our friends, neighbors that are up there in Calgary, especially to Brother JC Umel, who is our INC Radio producer in that area there for INC Radio Canada. Shout out to you, and thank you for all of the courteous and the welcoming there at
Love it.
the church for us in the Westmount locale. He's the head deacon of the Westmount locale up there in
Love it.
Calgary,
The
Canada.
extended INC family right there.
Yes, super. And we talked about this before, that's one of the things about traveling. It's like you travel to these different countries, you travel to all these different places, and you
Mhm.
still feel like you're at home when
Oh, yeah.
you go to church, because the people that you meet, all the same values.
Absolutely.
It's funny, all the same inside jokes.
Yeah.
Just
And like
maybe
you said, it's not just traveling from one, within the region or within your state. I mean, you're saying this is a different country. So,
right.
yes, well, you have different cultures when it comes to a country. I mean, you see, we share the same Christian values, and it's just beautiful. It's
Yeah.
incredible with a capital INC.
With a capital INC, 100%, 100%. So let's just dive in. And when we talk about screen time, obviously screen time has changed its definition. Screen time in my day, because we only had.
I don't mean to laugh.
It's okay. Laughter's fine. Screen time in my day was a single analog television. It was actually starting off in black and white. Then,
That's old
uh,
school right there.
right. But when you talk about screen time, back then, it's just television, and it was so limited, because back in the 70s, back in the 80s, you only had this one TV
Yeah.
that the whole family shared. People didn't have, like today, kids have
Mhm.
got TVs in their rooms, or if they don't have TVs in their rooms, they have computers in their rooms. If they don't have
Mhm.
computers in the rooms, they've got iPads, they've got iPhones or
In their
Android
pocket.
phones.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
screens are so much more accessible than they used to be when we were younger, or at least when us boomers slash Gen Xers were younger, right? So we only had the one screen shared by the whole household, and the availability of programming back then was ridiculous.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, you get cable today. What do you have, like 500 channels that you could choose
A lot more.
from?
No.
Unlimited streaming, all the different things that you're able to access. Back then, it was, you had, like, I think 3 stations. There were only 3 television stations back then, and you only had access to things like what kids would watch, which were cartoons on
Yes.
Saturday mornings from like 8 o'clock until 11 or 8 to 12. So fellow boomers slash Gen Xers that are out there, that struggle, right? When we only could watch things that we wanted to watch in the mornings on Saturday. So that meant that you had to get up early on a Saturday.
Yeah. Watch those
That was the only thing that
Saturdays.
got us up early. I think they did that on purpose. So, but I think we can all agree that now there are so many more different types of devices that you'll be able to access. So that's why there's such availability. And that's why we've been having this conversation, because screen time today, as the title says, is a real struggle. So let's talk about what the current trends are, right? So let's start by talking about what the current trends are. So according to the studies that are done by the CDC, the American Pediatrics Association, here in the United States, here are some of the trends that they've been spotting. And again, these trends are pretty current. They're as recent as 2021, 2022 statistics that they've been running, which is interesting because remember, during that period of time, Sister Joy, Sister Audrey, that was when the pandemic hit,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
when the pandemic hit, there was this spike of activity, obviously, on screen time. So, but these are the average trends. So let's take a look. Younger generations. So younger generations, especially the Gen Z, because obviously when you use the word young, you're not talking about people that are my age.
Nice
the,
try.
the average amount of screen time for those that are considered in that Gen Z period is around 9 hours a day,
That's
which is, you only spend 8 hours working, right?
Yes.
Now, I believe that this study probably includes everything, right? Obviously, streaming on your devices, streaming on your computers, just a variety of different things. We all know social media has probably driven so much of this additional screen time traffic, right? It's not just watching YouTube.
Mhm.
It's how
Yeah.
much what do they call it? Death scrolling, Sister Audrey, I think is
So
the term
doom
that they
scrolling.
doom scrolling. Might as
Ah,
well be death
Yeah.
scrolling. The doom scrolling where you're just constantly scrolling for no apparent reason other than just to kill time. And we've all done it, right?
lot that if I mean like in a regular working day, I'm just thinking, I remember just starting off working and having to sit in front of a computer, as one of, the main tools and resources for a job, and sitting there in front of a computer, that's a lot. But to kind of see it in data right here, that our younger generation, they're averaging about 9 hours daily.
Screen
That's a
time.
lot. And they're not working.
Mhm.
That's like,
No,
I mean,
they're
I'm
not
not,
even
it's not,
working yet, spending time in front of a computer.
yes, it's whether it's socializing or things like that, but just to think, wow, 9 hours, it's not like, they're not doing specifically a task, a working task, so
They're
that's,
entertaining themselves. That's what that is.
yes, me
And
in the
and
entertainment.
remember, I think it was probably a couple of months ago, we did that episode about what our screen time says about us.
Yes.
Remember that? So
Yes,
there's
yes,
that little tool.
I sure do.
I'm not gonna go through and put anybody. I'm not gonna put anybody on blast by talking about the hours that we all found. Okay, you have to go back and watch that episode.
Oh,
So
yes,
go
you
back and
guys,
watch that episode to see
what we
what
thought
each
we
of us
did is
had.
what we thought, and the
But
data.
you notice immediately that your screen time is like all of a sudden your phones will tell you that
Yeah.
based on the data, we're spending a lot of time on there because we're doing, either we're shopping, we're looking for an interesting place to eat. I mean, before, Lou and I traveled up north to go to Canada, I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to figure out like where to eat when we were in Calgary and what are the things in
Food.
Banff and Lake Louise that I want to be able to do while we're there. I mean, those are all things that required me to be in front of a screen. So when we take a look at teenagers, though, there's where there's this concerning amount of usage. Because according to the CDC and the stats, it's about 41% of American teens that are between 13 and 18 years old, right? So not yet even adults, are at least spending about 8 hours a day on the screen, right? So Gen Zers, many of them are potentially, already in college, maybe in the workforce slightly, but now we're talking about 13 to 18-year-olds
Yeah.
and spending 8 hours a day on the screens. And the studies that have been done by the CDC and the American Pediatric Association, they found that a lot of these have found links to their inability to socialize because it impacts their social skills, right? Because they're spending so much time on the screen and not
Mhm.
spending time with other human beings. It's impacting their academics, it makes sense because if you're spending too much time entertaining yourself, you're not hitting the books,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Unless of course they're just very industrious and they're studying on their iPads or they're studying on their Xbox consoles, right? They're studying their science papers on there, but I don't think
Well,
that's
that's a
happening.
skill that will be helpful for life skills. I don't know if those are life skills that will help.
Yeah, of course, those video games, there are a lot of applicable, like the driving games where you can drive. If you ask Sister Lulu, that's where I learned to drive, right?
Oh, dear.
On a racetrack.
Ooh.
I'd like to hear her
Um,
opinion now.
But when you also look at the links that it has to just mental health, and a lot of mental health issues that are found are because of the isolation that many of these teens are putting themselves in by not necessarily socializing,
Mhm.
with other people. So that's where you see a lot of this impact, in these three areas: social skills, academics, and mental health,
Mhm.
primarily because of teens, because they're still in that stage where I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, where their brains are still developing,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Even as an infant, their brains are developing, but then, they're now supposed to be at the stage of 13, 18, where they're absorbing education and they're absorbing all of these different habits that they're going to form
Mhm.
as they grow older. So that's a big number, right?
It is
8
a
hours
huge
for
number.
teens. And then so children aged 8 to 12. So now we're getting to these younger ages, right? So for us here in the church, these are who we would refer to as the Binhi, right?
Yes.
So these are
Mhm.
your Binhi, the members of the church. 8 to 12, they have substantial screen time, averaging about 5 hours a day. And as you said, it's for entertainment because no
Yeah.
8 or 12-year-old is hitting the workforce yet.
That's
Child labor.
spreadsheets, right? Inputting data.
Yeah, there's not anything industrious happening there. So it's purely entertainment. So that's about 5 hours a day. And then here's where we get to the to sort of the slippery slope, we'll call it. You have toddlers 0 to 2 years old, and they're engaging with smartphones at a very early age. So they may not be plopped in front of a screen
Mhm.
watching. Like when our son RJ was growing up, we joke all the time. It's like Barney, the dinosaur, right? The purple
I
dinosaur.
remember.
The purple dinosaur is we used to joke is yeah, our child was raised by a purple dinosaur, which explains a lot now. You can ask Sister Audrey to kind of elaborate on that. But so that it was very different then, because then you had only TVs. There was no internet. There was no
These handheld devices.
smartphones. There were no handheld devices. This was literally a TV, with a VHS tape. We had a library,
It's a big box.
little library of VHS tapes of the purple dinosaur and a
Wait, for
variety.
some of our viewers, do y'all know what a VHS tape
Yeah.
is?
And it's not
Think
just
about
three
it,
letters.
right?
VHS tapes. Do you remember what those are?
Do y'all know what it looks like? We got to do a show on that.
This was all pre-streaming, right? There was no streaming back then. Although you can stream him now. You have to look him up on YouTube. So if you're ever interested to see that, just YouTube Barney the dinosaur, and you'll see. You'll see how some of the kids back during the 90s that were born in the 90s were raised. So when you look at the toddlers from 0 to 2, they are engaging with smartphones, and a lot of it is just kind of incidental, right?
Mhm.
And why is that? It's because mom and dad probably on a smartphone, right? So mom and dad are on a smartphone, they're looking at YouTube, and they may just be happening to have their infant or their toddler sitting on their lap. So they're getting sort of this incidental exposure, is what we'll call it, to access for screen time. So there is exposure there. And then of course with adults, I mean, we're probably some of the guilty ones. There was obviously a significant increase during the pandemic, because then all of a sudden we were virtual. So
Yeah.
if you're working, you're in front of a screen. That was almost, there's no question. And also just because a lot of the entertainment that was accessible, because you couldn't go outside, you couldn't socialize with people. So socializing, even to have meetings like this on various meeting platforms, that involves screen time.
Very true.
And so you started to see a little bit of a decrease after the pandemic, but still the average for adults is about 7 hours and 3 minutes. So if you think about it, you have an 8-hour sort of work day, right? Then you have 8 hours of kind of what I would consider just family and home time, commuting time, if you have to commute to work. And then you're supposed to get about 8 hours of sleep, although none of us do that, right? So we probably offset some of that 8 hours with additional screen time.
Oh, yes.
So-
Especially now today. I mean, we said handheld, it's right there. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just you have to walk past this big heavy box with VHS
Mhm.
tapes, right?
Yeah.
There.
And it's all in your pocket. It's in your pocket. It's in your car. Some cars, I know that like even a lot of these electric cars, Teslas, they come with like YouTube access, right? You can actually watch on the big screen in your car.
Yeah.
And so those are even just making it more accessible, because everything has to live on a screen.
Everything.
And when you talk about whether or not you're doing it at work, depending on the kind of job that you have, if you work remotely, especially, probably some non-work related screen time that's happening.
Yeah.
And it just all piles on top of each other. So,
I remember learning this from my eye doctor after we were coming out of the pandemic. There's a season in your life where the quality of your eyes, like it kind of plateaus, right? Because I remember being a kid and I'm like, oh, my my eyesight's worsening, it's worsening, and then it plateaus. And then after coming out of the pandemic, my eye doctor's like, oh, the grade of your eyes have changed. And I'm like, oh man, what have I done? They're like, well, it's not just you. We're coming out of the pandemic where screen time has surged, right? And so with screen time surging, the quality of our eyes are, I'm like, no, I can't take this at this age right now. But it's true. We're spending a lot more time on these screens, and it's affecting even little things like that, like our eyesight.
Mhm.
Oh, it does. It does. I mean, glasses, they have readers. They have what do they call them? Blue blocker glasses that
Oh,
they
the blue
really
light,
Oh, the
right?
blue light
right,
lenses.
right.
Yeah.
And they're designed to really just kind of offset a lot of that impact that you're suffering from, and the radiation that's being, or not the radiation, but basically the Blu-ray lights
Mhm.
that are being emitted from these screens because we spend so much time on them. And I'm wearing a pair right now, and for obvious reasons, spending a lot of time on the screen. But
Mhm.
when you talk about how much time we're spending as adults, I mean, 7 hours is significant because you're supposed to be working 8, sleeping 8, and spending the other 8 with your family, right? So if you think about it, if there's 7 hours of screen time, and I'm assuming like more than half of that doesn't happen at work, then you're taking away either from your sleep or from your time with your family, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
Good.
that's the math. There's only 24 hours in a
You know,
day. As much as we try to
you can't change that part.
as much as we try to squeeze more out of it, there's
Yeah.
only 24 hours in a day. So just
Mhm.
think about that. And so let's talk a little bit more about, like, what are the common household pain points that you guys have got in the house? I mean, your kids, Sister Joy, are sort of these stair stepped age ranges, right?
Mhm.
Teenagers, high school, and still in elementary.
Yes.
Um, are they are your kids, especially older, like Jacob, for example, kind of got through
Yes.
this whole series? Is he like more of when he's on devices, is it mostly more games, or is it mostly more like entertainment stuff?
I think it's definitely a mix. And at like when you enter into those
Hmm.
teen years, right? Friends are a huge thing. So I have to say entertainment, because keeping connected with friends is a big deal. And I'm still kind of new to this, right? When it comes to like video chatting, right? And because, we're talking about screen time back then in my day, I mean, in order to stay connected, it's a phone call.
Right.
There's text messaging was just kind of, that's what it was. It was a phone call, and then we would meet. If it's long distance, we would write. So right. But it's so interesting that now today, what I'm noticing is that in order for them to hang out, and my oldest Jacob, he's 13, to hang out, they video call. They use FaceTime. And
Really?
yes, and it's so interesting. And they could be doing homework together, and they're not doing all the same assignments. They're hanging out on a video call.
Oh, you mean
Oh,
like
interesting.
Oh,
the
you
way we
see?
used to be able to get together, like in a study room or
Yes.
something?
Yes.
They're in a
Yes, isn't
wow.
that yes, so a lot of his time is like he's hanging out with friends virtual not is that virtually? Yeah, like they're on a
Yeah.
video call. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm like, "Oh, hey guys." They're there on a call, and sometimes they're working on things individually, separately, but that's how they hang out.
Wow.
And
Well,
so
if they're on a
yeah.
video call, it means that you can't be walking around the house doing what you normally do then.
Or wearing
Right.
Because you're on camera then, obviously. They need to give you a warning about that, because in my house, that could be really embarrassing. So they they need to not.
You know what? We've had this discussion with our kids. We're like, this is not embarrassing for us. This is probably more embarrassing for you
For
guys.
you, yeah.
Oh, correct.
You see in the background, you're on a video call, you see mom and dad dancing in the background or something. Nobody needs to see that. No one needs to see that. So
Like,
I
wait, was
guess,
that your mom? Are you
yeah,
sure it's your mom?
I didn't know they could move like that.
Oh
But
goodness
so,
gracious.
what about for you, Sister Audrey? Because the child that you've got in the house, and I'm speaking of Brother RJ, is he more of a, he's a Gen Xer? No,
I
millennial.
don't know. Is it Alpha that's
Millennial.
after Z? I
Yeah.
don't know.
It's
I stopped counting
Yes,
until it's relevant.
I know boomers and
yeah, boomers. I'm right on the cusp. I was born at a time when it was the great changeover from boomers to Gen Xers,
there it
and
is.
then you have your millennials, obviously, which I think RJ is part of that millennial period as
Yeah.
Audrey. So what's his screen time mostly? Is his mostly like entertainment, social media, or gaming?
Sorry, which child are we talking about? My husband or my baby?
Your husband. Yeah, your husband.
No, I mean, his is definitely more entertainment. I mean, because he like it's all like UFC that I've observed. That's on if it's not on his social media feed, it's like keeping up with UFC news and what's trending with that. And then a lot of comedians. And if it's not those two things, it's also searching up like what uh, what foods do I feed my 10-month-old, or what are the next
Oh,
Well,
milestones
see,
for my
that's well,
10-month-old?
a
so
nice
that's
mix.
research. That's
So
research,
research, yes,
right?
but it's
So he gets a
I
pass
would
for
say
that.
that is a very small portion of my husband's phone usage or screen usage. On the other hand, his wife, that's been like that's taken up the majority of what I use my screen for. Like I was looking at my phone the other day, and my screen time usage has gone down significantly in the past 2 years. I mean, to be expected.
I
I
was
was
gonna
gonna
say,
say it's probably tanked in the last maybe I'd
Correct.
say 4 or 5 months
Yes.
since Baby J has gotten more mobile.
yes.
Yes. Yes. That is 1,000%. I feel like the moment he's started literally hit the ground running, our worlds have completely changed.
Completely.
You've come full stop. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what's interesting is when you talk about the differences. Like I know that there was a period of time when a lot of these kids were glued to their gaming consoles. Gaming was such a big thing, right? And that's where the struggle with parents really started because a lot of like, especially boys, young boys, gaming becomes such an addiction for them. And I'm going to use the term addiction because when you have to pull somebody away, that's what that turns into. And then you're having to sit there and try to offset that versus getting their homework done. I doubt, at teen ages, even though I've seen some shocking videos of like kids who are throwing tantrums when they're having their screen time taken away from them, which is crazy because that just shows you
Serious.
it's a
Yeah.
withdrawal symptom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If they have that kind of a kind of a visceral reaction to it, that's a withdrawal symptom. The same thing that you would have if you were addicted to anything, for example, right? So throwing that kind of a tantrum to it, or just and this last bullet is what gets me because this happens to adults, right? We call it binge watching.
Right.
Mhm.
How many of us have started like a streaming series because we were looking for something? We said, "Oh, this looks like it might be interesting. Maybe I'll watch the pilot episode." And it's only 45 minutes, so I'll watch the pilot episode, and then I'll see if I like it. Then I'll keep watching it. And now you're 3 seasons in, 10 episodes per season, and you've
Well,
not eaten
so
in 2 days.
to hop on that, because speaking on behalf of that party, I think you're in different certain avenues of that, right? Because and this can be its whole own topic, like just binge watching or just binging on content, because I found myself like pulling away from the screen time. That's how I was with books growing up. The moment I started a series, I was hooked on it, and I couldn't just change series in the middle of one series. So like when I was really into like Harry Potter, I stuck with that and then stayed with the whole series. And man, did I rack up some summer book reading points for the book fair.
You know what? I think that's also key too, when it comes to like sometimes And let's bring that back a little bit. Like
Yeah.
sometimes kids and parents don't give up, man. It's just they just need to find that one interest and that one series, and then they'll get
Yeah.
into that into reading or find that theme, and let's try to encourage that, because oh gosh, it's
Yeah,
just so
because and like, I mean, and I know I've made my point pretty clear maybe lately, but like that it's the whole concept of storytelling and creativity. You don't have that when you're on a screen because
Mhm,
it's all being fed to you.
mhm.
Even like the underlying tones, like no one needs to be talking or there's no subtitles. But when it's strictly text, a book, your brain is functioning on
Yeah.
a totally another level. It's
Mhm.
forcing you to exercise a muscle that varies from person to person. So creativity is just it's another pathway that's it's amazing how complex humans can be compared to any other species.
And I
It's
think that there's those
it's
connections.
it's
Yeah.
great that you brought that up because that was actually going to be my question. So you talk about this addiction to maybe addiction maybe too strong in this sense, but when you talk about starting a series of books, right? Whatever the series
Yeah.
of the book is, right? And you just have to go on to the next book and the next book and the next book. And I guess there's two things. One is um was there ever a point where you found the need to have to continue reading that book and getting to the next series and finishing the book? Like, I don't know how long it takes to read a whole book because I've probably never read a whole book in my life. I've always started and then I've jumped to the very back page cover to see what happens at the end.
Does that
So,
include instruction manuals?
yeah, well, men don't even read instruction manuals, so I don't know. We
No,
we
nor
just
will they ask for
we
help.
just we just look at it. But when you get to that point where you're reading a book and you're really into it and you're so excited that you just want to finish that book or finish the series,
Mhm.
one of the things
Mm.
we just talked about is that there's this time management issue where you screen time takes away your time management because you're doom scrolling or you're doing whatever versus being on a book. So aren't they kind of one and the same in terms of like how it's consuming the time that you should be investing somewhere else?
Yeah, I find that they have that relation that both will kind of take away. It's almost that impulse control, right? So
Mhm.
there's learning of a when to limit yourself or when to stop, but screen time gets you so stimulated for such a longer period of time because there's so many things going on the screen to keep you hooked and activated. I mean, simply as going through social media or even like YouTube where you can be watching us, if you're going through YouTube shorts, it's as quick as like 10 seconds and the next thing it goes on to the next thing for you. And so,
Yeah.
like you don't even have to swipe anymore. And so it's with that constant simulation, it's a drastic difference with what your brain is doing when you're reading a book because you're following text that's forcing you to create images in your mind. And
Mhm.
so you're trying to create that picture, you're going through that sensory, and it's not being fed to you because you have to come up with that on your own based on the description that you're reading.
Maybe that's the reason why I can't finish a book because I'm not picturing the right things. I'm only seeing text. I've been doing this all wrong for the last 58 years.
Oh my goodness.
Well, okay, so that's a point well taken. So you're obviously the key difference there also is that when you're doom scrolling or going through the screen,
Mhm.
I think that there's also some physiological concerns, right?
Yeah.
Come
And
here.
and this is just as a book nerd, because I love reading, love reading. And I so love my husband for reigniting that flame with me.
With
Um,
a Kindle, right?
yes, with the
But isn't that a
Kindle.
screen though?
Oh,
Isn't that a
It,
screen?
yes, it's a screen. However, Kindles are
Trying to
built a
get
little
her,
bit
Sister Joy.
differently. I know. I'm getting poked and prodded.
you are.
But
But you know what? I've been wanting to get a Kindle, and it's because that just it becomes more portable. So I'm interested to
it
hear,
is.
right?
And
Instead of carrying the physical book, because that's my problem. Like, oh, I left my book again at the
Books
desk.
are
well, my
heavy.
my son can't rip the pages of my book, and then all of a sudden I have no idea where to navigate. I mean, here he can swipe, he can change the font of my book, and that's like the that's the minuscule
Wow.
irritant.
But you
But
still can bookmark it, right?
yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So
cool.
it just picks up right off. And I mean, there's settings where you can change that. But I mean, just speaking for a book lover, it's like it's the art of language too, because how many people can you ask, like if they read a certain paragraph, they interpret it differently from the
Different.
next. Like
Mhm.
it's and a level of language that is constructed that some people might not follow because of that. There's an artistry with language, with text. And so when you describe something, sometimes someone might not be able to conceive it because of the words that's being used and the vernacular, and it's like, oh, what does that mean? So
Mhm.
and it's just how you use words. I mean, this is a whole nother topic too,
And that's
but how you
definitely a
use
good onion
words.
to peel, because I think we discussed a little bit about that, right? Um,
Yeah.
not when it comes to reading books, but when it came to like messaging and communication. I think we had a show on that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And we discussed that, like how, just how it's interpreted alone, and
Mhm.
that we're bringing over to just when it comes to reading. Yes. And so that's, we talk about, okay, all these connections are developing with our youth, and that's exactly one of those connections that is being established, right? That's growing when it comes to the non-screen time. So that's definitely a variable right there that can just have such a great impact on our kids if we just give them a little bit. I know, let's start with baby steps first, right?
Right,
So
right. Well, and I think, as the final bullet on this page talks about, it's about understanding that balance, right?
Mhm.
Screen time isn't all bad,
Mhm.
but
Especially this one. So if you're watching
yeah,
us,
yeah. If you're reading books on your
Right,
screen, then
especially on
okay,
YouTube.
I'll give that gets a half credit. That's not real screen time, so you're actually reading a book.
yes, and
But
then tuning in to us, INC Radio Florida, that's a
right,
must screen
right.
time.
So that is a public service announcement.
There you go.
The only screen time that we endorse is screen time when you're reading a book, like on a Kindle, or if you're watching us on YouTube on
Yes.
It's
INC Radio
the 1
Florida.
hour of INC Radio
Yeah,
Florida.
There you
so
go. And
one
you can
one
read
hour of your
too.
7 hours of screen time has to be devoted to us. All right, moving on to the next one is, what is the right amount then? Because a lot of parents ask this all the time, like how much
Mhm.
time. We've seen these statistics, right? 8 hours, 9 hours, 7 hours for varying age trends, right? From infants who are being exposed because of the phones and the access to the phones, or in many cases as they get into these. And what's scary
Mhm.
is that screen time is actually being promoted in some cases through the school system too, because
Mhm.
many of them are requiring them to have laptops or having screens of some sort, right? Because
Mhm.
in their approach to it is they're trying to look at different ways to deliver content to the students. More so, they want it to be more interactive. They don't want it to be just books, which is interesting, because that kind of goes completely against what we were just talking about,
Yeah.
where reading a book and reading the text is what really encourages the creative juices flowing, right? The ability for you to really promote creativity, where now they want so much more media content being pushed in the schools
Wow.
through a lot of the technology that's being encouraged. So when we take a look at like the guidelines, like here are the standard guidelines, and these guidelines are provided to us through the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, based on a
I find
2021
that
study.
so interesting how the CDC got involved with
Yeah, the CDC's got their hands in everything
Mhm.
now. So,
Yeah. Okay,
but
let's
they're
get involved in this. Yes.
when we started doing the research on this, we were looking at like what are the trends, the American Pediatric Association and different places that we went to here in the United States. And almost in every instance, it referred back to the study that was done by the CDC in 2021, 2022. And now these are like the official guidelines. If you go, when we say they're guidelines, if you go to your doctor, the
Mhm.
pediatrician, this is what they're going to tell you,
Yeah.
because these
Mhm.
are the guidelines that are being
Yeah.
published through the CDC. So, and again, your mileage may vary depending on your household situation, and depending on how insistent your grandparents are, your child's grandparents. Mr. Audrey, sorry. But when we talk about current guidelines, and obviously this makes total sense. If they're under 18 months of age, the screen time that they should have, period, should be video chatting with loved ones. We do that all the time with baby J, right? When we're not around.
Oh, yes.
Canada.
Lola and Lola would not be happy if that was taken away.
If we had to tell them, sorry, there's no more screen time, you're gonna have to drive down from Jacksonville if you want to see him. So except for video chatting, the guideline from the CDC is that there really should be no screen time. So that's 18 months is about a year and 6 months. I argue that baby J is probably about 24 months now anyway. So
in size. And appetite, but
he's very mentally developed. He's just so mature. He's so mature.
He is solid.
That's right. So, but now when you get past 18 months, okay, we get past that year and a half. Between that and 2 years old, you could start to introduce, and this is I could almost say sometimes subjective, high quality educational media with parental involvement. I will say that even when you are exposing your child to screen time, screen time, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a purple dinosaur or a former kindergarten teacher who's become hugely popular because now she's on all these streaming services because she's able to teach children directly through. You guys know who I'm talking about. But when we talk about parental involvement, it should never be a situation where you take the child and you put them in front of a screen, whatever the programming is, and then you just basically leave them there unattended for hours.
Like a babysitting situation, or like here.
Because I've actually seen videos where, as part of the study, where they're put in a high chair or something where they basically don't have any choice, right? And they're sitting in front of a screen, and even to the point where they get tired of watching it, they don't want to watch it anymore. They're still sitting in front of it, right? Because they can't go anywhere.
Yeah, they don't have a choice.
I'm strapped to a chair and I'm watching this for the next hour or 2 hours or whatever, and it's really sad, because then at that point your child or this child is being subjected to having to watch it, whether they prefer to watch it or not. It's different if the child has freedom to move around. If they're watching it and then you notice, oh, okay, yeah, this is cute, and then after 10 minutes, I'm done. I'm going to go back to playing. And which is where parental involvement. So of course, that's one of the guidelines, is that introducing high quality educational media. I would probably argue that Purple Dinosaur is not really super high quality educational media, but back in the day they could be, because you learn how to wash your hands.
But I think this also comes with parenting, period. They don't tell you these things when you become a parent.
No.
Or even when you're planning, you're excited when you get married and you're like, yeah, let's plan to grow our family, right? And then you have this little one, and now you got to put up these guardrails. I mean, not only do you have to help them survive and
survive the world, right?
Yeah, but now we got to put these guardrails up when it comes to screen time, where we're in a culture where it's in our pocket and things like that. And then, so it can, you feel like, oh my gosh, so I'm doing this wrong this whole time, or I can't do this anymore. So yeah, it's very, very, we have to be be It's highly involved.
Oh yeah. And we get it, because, it's so tempting that when you're a new parent, that you have a tool, that your child can be entertained by, supposedly, so you can get all of your stuff done that needs to get done, right?
Yes.
It's tempting. We get it. But you need to be sure that it's done with involvement and supervision, because at 18 to 24 months, their brains are developing. It's
Yeah.
really the opportunity for them to learn certain things. They may not be able to read yet, obviously, so that's not where their creativity is being sourced from. But there's different ways to do that as well. And some media helps to promote that, and some really doesn't. So it really is a matter of knowing what it is that they're watching and being involved in that. And then when they get to 2 to 5 years old, and you want to limit any non-educational screen time to really just about an hour a day, right? Or an hour per weekday, and then maybe 2, 3 hours on the weekends. And then when they get to be 5 or 17 years old, then now you start looking at like recreational screen time. And this is where you have to decide, like, what's that category going to be? Is it a gaming console? Is it watching a streaming service? Because, if you're watching a movie on a streaming service when you're 16 years old, that's already like 2 hours.
Yeah,
right?
and just one movie.
Oh, easy for one movie.
One movie, right? That's 2
Some
hours.
movies are a little bit like 2 hours plus now, depending on right. That you're like,
So
I mean, some TV series like episodes are an hour plus.
Yeah, especially when it's like an intro, like a pilot episode to something. So, that could be a bit of a struggle. And again, a lot of this is done. Your mileage may vary, is what we're going to say, but it has to be done with supervision. That's the parent's job, right? You as parents know what's best for your children. So you have to be able to supervise and oversee what this activity looks like in order for you to be sure that they're getting the around the right amount of the screen time that they should be getting, right? So when we go back, we just talked about the guidelines, but when you want to talk about what are the adjustments that are based on your age, your school needs, and your family lifestyle, that's where it's really important. So when we talk about your mileage may vary, it's because every household is different. Circumstances are different. There is no cookie cutter, like, if you do this, your children will thrive, they will be geniuses, and they're all going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Right?
Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where do I subscribe for that? I gotta go online to do it. But you and parents, not parent, we're saying parents. That means it's a team, right? Mom and dad both have to be able to come together and decide what are those guidelines going to be for their children, and they have to be sort of in agreement to it, right? Until,
both
of
on
course,
the same page for sure.
Right, they got to be on the same page, and then that way both on the same page until the grandparents show up, and then all of a sudden you've got to make sure that they're both on the same page. But when you start to look at it, the quality of what they're watching over the time. And that's really, really what's important. So when we talk about not all screen time is created equal, watching an educational program or watching something together, like, we have lots of educational programs and a lot of very spiritually uplifting programs, especially on INC Media here in the church. Again, that type of screen time is very different than the screen time that you have when somebody's scrolling through social media to see what the latest fashion trends are. Or the next great place to have your meal.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that because Brother Ryan DeSena, a beautiful tech to that. Quality is key. Screen time can be a good time, especially when you spend it with family while watching something educational and spiritual like INC Media, which we know are different. There's so many different content and things that are appropriate for a certain age and topics that are covered on INC Media. So you've got options.
Right. So that's where the word "not all screen time is created equal" is really comes into play, because when you talk about what is the quality of that content, is it uplifting, is it educational, is it spiritual, enriching, things that will help us both not only in just our daily lives but also in our spiritual lives. Can you quantify that as being something that you could spend more time with, maybe, than you would with, like I said, watching some sort of entertainment television of some sort? So as we start to look at these things, these are things that as parents, and we've got to check the boxes. I mean, there's no 100% right or wrong answer. It's something that each parent has to discuss with their child and discuss it together. I can't emphasize that enough, because otherwise, as they grow up, you're going to have kids who are going to know that I can go run to dad because he'll let me watch TV, or spend more time on my device than if I go to mom. And then, or if I go to grandpa, not that I would encourage that. Right. It's
Send them all to you.
yeah. Just
Have a line.
don't send them all to me. But here's some rules. We want to give you guys some rules that you guys can use at home to help at least maybe get a kickstart in building these habits, because we have to start from someplace. It doesn't matter where you are today. It's a matter of, if you feel like, okay, we've got to start creating some ground rules and creating some boundaries, where do we start? Well, one is, maybe deciding that there are certain places where there shouldn't be technology allowed. How many times have we all sat at a dinner table together where people spend more time staring at their phone than actually having conversation or enjoying their meal? Unless you're spending time on your phone taking photos of the food that you're eating. It's a little different.
I haven't bite yet. I gotta take
I'm
a
guilty.
picture.
Oh man, we'll do a show on rules when you're eating with somebody who has to take pictures of everything. Because
We need to
my
take
family-
the picture of those that are in the background set going like, I'm so hungry.
I think our family's conditioned to hear that. They know that when the food comes out, it doesn't matter how hungry you are, and no one takes a bite or a spoonful until a photo's been taken.
It's
right?
hands on the table for 5 minutes, and then we can go.
Exactly.
Well, everyone's like,
Everyone's staring at the food. It's the anticipation. It just makes you want it even more. So, at the dinner table, it should be a ground rule, right? When you're sitting at the dinner table together. Well, and this even goes further. We talked about this before, about when we talked about spending quality time with each other. Like, how many families actually even get to spend a dinner together? Like literally sitting around a table and having dinner together, instead of, and we're guilty of it in this household too, because we all lead such busy lives that we, maybe dinner will be cooked and then everybody kind of grabs it, when Kalula makes something fabulous, we're going to grab our plates and we're going to eat it kind of our own time. One of us may be sitting on the couch, one of us may be sitting on the counter, right? On the counter island, and the other person could be sitting at the dining table. And so
someone's in front of the pot, like scooping.
Yeah. Or one person, which is usually my wife, she's slaving over the pot and having to eat at the same time. So we really just need to think about, like, okay, we're gonna have dinner, and dinner is at this time. All of us get together, because that's the way it used to be. I mean, when we didn't have cell phones and screen times, when I was running around during the prehistoric era with my friends, we were told, you come and eat at 5:00. If you didn't come to eat at 5:00, you weren't eating dinner. So you didn't have dinner. You went home to bed hungry. So if I ever lost track of time and got home after 5:00, I wasn't eating. So
and that was like, and then that's the time when, like, kids go outside to play. Screen time. Yeah,
I'm like 3 miles from home.
Wait, Mom, you can't call her.
And I'm just rushing home, because back then it was when it got dark. It wasn't a time. It was when the sun was down and it was dark. You better be home. And having that dinner together, eating together, is something that a lot of families don't experience today. And it's just purely because we've got busy lives. So making time to do that's job one. Make time to have dinner with your family at least several times a week. Some may work during dinner time, but at least try to make that effort. And when you do make the effort to put the phones away and the devices away and the TV turned off. So this way you can actually have conversations.
And if you're doing this, like, maybe for the first time, you might get a little, a little friction, but just try to have grace. Because then otherwise it defeats the purpose, right? Everyone's mad. Like,
it says I should be on my phone right now.
Or they're just trying to eat real quick, but have some grace and try to do it with, just utmost love, and maybe just start off small first.
Just value the time you're having with each other. Well, it's instead of like
the purpose of that.
Instead of sitting there going, man, I should be taking a picture of this right now, but I can't because I don't have my phone. This meal looks so good. It would taste so much better if I had a picture of it. But doing that, and it doesn't just extend to the dinner table, right? We talk about in the bedroom, because for parents, that could be the time that you're actually having conversations with each other, talking about the day. It's funny. We were with a family that we ran into in Orlando from our congregation, the Campos family, Brother Rico and Sister Grace, and he was talking about kind of a thing that they do every night, which I thought was really, really cool. He has 3 young girls,
Uh-huh.
and when at the end of every day, they would sit down and without devices or anything, have a conversation and just basically ask, okay, how was your day? What were the things you did today? And, or the things you want to be able to talk about. They dedicated that time to be able to talk with their girls about that every day. And he
No.
said that sometimes he doesn't want to do it anymore because what they usually say is, well, Daddy, you embarrassed us when you did this. But
Well,
it's
since you
still,
mentioned how was my
yeah,
day,
since you brought it up, let me tell you.
you got a clipboard and a pencil ready to like document all this. And
But I think but that's that whole quality time. No technology. Just let's sit down and let's spend 15 minutes to talk about your day, what you learned, things that you want to get off your chest or whatever, right? I think that's awesome that you could do that. And then setting up the time limits for tech curfews, tough to do, but you got to create, like you just said, Sister Joy, easy to follow starter boundaries, right? You're not going to be able to do it immediately, but you got to start someplace because if you don't start, then it's never going to happen, obviously. Have an
Yeah.
agreement kind of set aside. That's pretty straightforward. You want to be sure that you guys have got an agreement to what that's going to be, that everyone's bought into it. And then,
everybody, that we're not just endorsing, especially as a parent, it's so hard. You're going to say, okay, kids, these are what the rules are for you.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's a thing together for families, for all of us. Those guardrails are there for all members of the family.
right. And it has to apply to everybody, right? So you want to turn, and when you do have your screen time, turn it into some time that you can do together. Watch a movie together, or watch videos together. So this way you can all share the experience. You could talk about what you're seeing. And if you think about it, you all can relate because later on you'll be able to talk and reference things where you say, oh yeah, remember when we watched this video about the whatever. They're core memories, they're shareable memories that you can experience together. And then there's a lot of apps and tools. I won't really go into detail there because we covered that actually in an episode. We were talking about what our tech habits say about us. So go back to watch that episode for the specific tools that we were talking about that you could use. But we want to be able to throw some shout outs out there. So let's talk about wrapping this all up, right? So as parents, we have to lead by example, right? And so the example you see here is obviously parents, grandparents sitting around enjoying a pizza and some apple juice, but at the same time, they're all sitting there watching their screens, right? It's really, really just, again, a matter of what your children witness you doing is what the habits your children will form, right? So subconsciously, it's completely subconscious. It's not even like you're telling them to do it. They see you doing it. They think it's acceptable. Therefore, they're going to do it themselves. And that's where the whole parents leading by example is such an important part of raising your children. And then, of course, encouraging them and promoting modeling the right behaviors. Turn off your phone at night. We have have a certain daughter in the house whose name I won't mention, but I can't tell you how many times I walked into the room and found a phone with the screen still on, laying on her chest, and she's asleep. So, but I'm not revealing the name of my daughter who lives with us.
The one daughter
Yeah.
in your
Not pointing any fingers or anything.
And you want to. Well, that's going to be one less viewer we're going to have for the show now, I guess.
I do want to shout out Sister Keith Daphne. We love to read, sing, INC kids music videos, and talk to our baby all day long because it encourages face-to-face interaction. And then when preparing food, we call our family to entertain Koa, their little baby who's only a few months old. And tying to leading by example and just that development with young children. Shout out to Sister Rizalina. I would love to get a landline. I want to teach my son to
Wow.
build on quality conversations versus getting distracted by other apps on the phone, drawing and emojis on FaceTime. And I mean, that's the biggest advocate for that timeline of screen time usage per milestone, right? Because really it's just a season. It's a season when you're raising kids, and there's a time and place for everything, and in moderation too.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the things that we really need to focus on is understanding, what's that balance going to be. And as parents, like we've said before, raising your children is there is no set guide other than the Bible. That's the one guide that we all follow is what's written there in the Holy Scriptures, because it's what's going to help lead our children to understand the values that they should follow. But the instruction manual of how much screen time they should have, probably not in there. So those are things that you're going to have to be able to develop and be able to understand clearly, just based on experience. Being parents is a lot of learning as you go. And so remember, parents, don't give in, don't surrender, and most importantly, don't let those hard days win. Is my latest favorite saying, right?
Don't let it win. You've got this.
So
yeah, it's
right.
a big fat mirror, but
That's what it is. That's what it is. All right. Well, we are down to the bottom of the hour for us, and we apologize. We're going a little bit over here for our friends who are coming up next, and that, of course, are our friends over at INCRadio, Washington, D.C. So please stay tuned for them. And for next week, joining us again here on INCRadio Florida, this is Brother Robert Topalis in Tampa, for Sister Audrey, who really is there. She's also in Tampa. There she is. And then Sister Joy, of course, there in Orlando. Have a wonderful Saturday. Happy July, and we will see you all next week.
This is INC Radio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ, or Iglesia.